Join Louisiana Right to Life in protecting the vulnerable as we share pro-life stories, insights, and news from the Pelican State. Welcome to the Preaux-Life Pod.
Hey everybody, Ben Clapper here with Louisiana Right to Life, and I'm joined by
Erica Inzina, Policy Director at Louisiana Right to Life.
And the legislative session for 2025 is in the past.
Yes,
Sine die, the legislature is done for the year and they're headed back home.
Oh my goodness, and what a session it was.
Yeah, it was fast. I mean, just 2 months long, started in April, a fiscal session, and bam, 2 months, which seems like a long time, but still is fast.
Oh, but fast does not mean boring or, without lots to do. So
That's
we
right.
were very, very busy this session. So.
Absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, Louisiana Right to Life, every year, really since the 70s, has been engaged in the legislative process, working to defend life, help moms, and promote adoption. And so it's been such an important part of our mission and our work. And sometimes people ask me, what do we do at the Capitol? Maybe we should start, well, what do we do, and what does Louisiana Right to Life do at the Capitol? Not in the big picture, pass some laws here and there, but on the day-to-day basis, what is it that we do, Erica?
One of the things that I think we do the most is to educate the legislators and the people they work with on the issues, because they have so many issues that they have to be very knowledgeable about. And, we know our issue very well. We know a whole lot about the ins and outs and the problems and ways that we think that the problems can be resolved, but they don't know it that well. And so that's one of the things that I think that we do, having those conversations, lots of conversations explaining how things are really happening and what kind of problems they're creating.
Absolutely. And, it starts even before the session because we are helping drafting laws. We're helping work with legislators on concepts. Some of them come to fruition. Some of them are on the drawing room floor or the cutting room floor. That's common. And then once we're there at the Capitol, we may be writing amendments that never see the light of day. We may be, like you said, having a lot of conversations, testifying in committee, figuring out who's voting with us, who's not voting with us. So many little different things.
That's true too. I think that was one of the things that I didn't expect coming into this role was, how much work you would put into, say, an amendment or to a piece of legislation that may never be relevant at all because it didn't come to that. So
that's right, absolutely.
It's an interesting process for sure.
Yeah, probably, what would you say? A third of what we do never sees the light of day,
And not because there's not interest in it, just because the process goes in a different direction. And so I think it's kind of like plan A through double Z,
right. Yeah.
So.
And I think on the big picture idea is that the pro-life movement has to be at state capitals across America, right? The abortion industry wants to expand abortion across America, and the culture of death really in general is looking to expand. And we've got to be there.
Yeah.
If we're not there, if good men and women aren't there standing for life to protect babies, then the culture of death is going to expand and grow. So it's that idea that we're somewhat the watchmen and watchwomen on the wall, standing strong for life. And if we're there, something may happen that's not good for life. It still may happen, but it would definitely happen if we're not there.
I agree with that. And I've heard many legislators say, particularly about your role there in the past, that they really rely on Louisiana Right to Life to inform them on the issues because they, like I said, they just don't know the depth of the issues like we do. Yeah. They have so many things that they are concerned with and have to be at least minimally knowledgeable about. So I think it's, to your point, very important for the pro-life movement to be present.
Right. And I just want to say to all of our supporters of Louisiana Right to Life, thank you so much for your support, because our supporters enable us to be there.
Absolutely.
Not only the time, but all the logistical costs that come into it,
Yes.
the advocacy time, all the equipment or tools or programs that we use. And so we just know that our supporters are, in a sense, there with us. That sounds kind of cheesy, right? But I mean, still, the people who are supporting us are there in spirit with us.
You know, Ben, I think about it this way. You know, I think that our representatives are there to represent the people of their districts and of the state, and we're there to represent the pro-life movement.
That's right.
So, you know, we're obviously not legislators, but we are there to speak for the pro-life movement.
Absolutely.
And if we weren't there, like you said, it wouldn't be spoken. So.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get into
Yeah.
what happened during the session. So the first topic, and this is a battle we've been involved in for now the past couple of years, really for a long time, which are abortion pills.
Yes.
And so maybe, Erica, take us back to what came out. And I know we talk about it a lot in our different content, but people may not see it. What happened in West Baton Rouge Parish, and then how that led us into really two of our main bills that passed this session. So
Yeah.
maybe bring us back to there. That came out just a month or two before session, a few
Yeah.
months. So go ahead.
So if you don't know, a very tragic story came out of West Baton Rouge Parish just before the legislative session started, in which a young girl, I should say a young teenager, was forced by her mother to abort her child through abortion pills that the mother obtained online. And like you've said, we've been sounding the alarm on these abortion pills for years, talking about the dangers of the availability of them, and then the physical dangers to women, and obviously the intended danger to the unborn child. And unfortunately, we've been saying this for years, but unfortunately the state saw that this is a real issue through the West Baton Rouge situation. So the district attorney of West Baton Rouge, Mr. Tony Clayton, prosecuted the mom and the doctor from New York who was involved in getting the pills to the mom so that she could use them for this crime of coercing her daughter to have an abortion. That girl ended up in the emergency room with complications and is both, physically scarred and certainly emotionally scarred for life because of this. Like you mentioned, that happened right as the legislative session was getting ready to get started. And I like to remind people that situation, though it coincided with the beginning of the legislative session, it is not the only situation that we know of. It is our best example that most people are aware of, but we hear about this happening all the time. People getting abortion pills very easily and then causing harm, being used to coerce them into having an abortion, and it's a really tragic situation. So what we've learned through that process, through the West Baton Rouge process, is that though we have great criminal protections in Louisiana, criminal penalties for that type of activity, the opposition is very clever, and they have erected very interesting ways to get around being held accountable for that. And so that brought into light some weaknesses, I guess you would say, with our law. And again, I think that these are things that we knew needed to be dealt with, but the West Baton Rouge situation really cemented that now is the time. We can't just keep theoretically talking about what could be done. This has to be done now. And so we had a lot of great support with Attorney General Liz Murrell, District Attorney Tony Clayton, several other people who helped out, and that brought to light two bills, HB 575 and HB 425. HB 575 by Representatives Ventrella and Emerson, and then HB 425 by Representative Josh Carlson out of Lafayette.
Right. And Representative Julie Emerson, who's also the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, been a strong advocate for life now for a number of years at the state capitol, and it's hard to believe in a couple of years she'll be termed out, which will be sad.
Yes.
But she's from the Lafayette area, strong advocate. And then State Representative Lauren Ventrella, who's in her first term, but from the Greenwell Springs area outside Baton Rouge, also advocating for that bill.
Yes, both fierce advocates, and we're so grateful to them for bringing this issue to the legislature. So.
Right, and I think they recognized the harm that was being done to women, and coming from a woman's perspective, they felt this was important to take action on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you want to talk about the
Sure.
two bills?
Yeah. So HB 575, we called it the Justice for Victims. You got it there.
Yes,
right?
it's the Justice for Victims of Abortion Drug Dealers Act.
That's right.
And
I think just to stop there, I mean, people are like, oh, that's kind of a sensational title, but these are abortion drug dealers. I mean, what do you call someone who is shipping drugs around the country for money, basically? I mean, with no safety precautions, nothing else. So they are abortion drug dealers, and there are victims like these women. And I just have to stop and say real quick that we've seen in the news even more recently here as sessions ended about this awful, terrible story out of Texas where this woman was, her drink was spiked with an abortion pill, and sadly she lost her baby.
Yeah.
The abortion that her boyfriend did to her killed the child, killed the baby, and now he's being prosecuted in Texas.
Yeah,
and this is, like Senator Presley's story from last year, but that one, thankfully, she didn't lose the child, right?
Yes.
But this one is, especially tragic because she lost a baby. So just another example of the victims, women who are victims of the reckless spread of abortion pills in our country.
Yeah, and like we said, this is a shocking outcome, and it is a disturbing thing that can happen, but it's not at all surprising.
Right.
I mean, that's what happens when you can obtain abortion pills that easily. And so as parents, as women, as just citizens of this great state, we should all be very concerned about how these pills are so easily available and can be used to cause harm in general, but also can be used to force harm upon women. So HB 575, it expands upon a cause of action that's already part of Louisiana law, in which a woman can hold an abortion provider accountable. But it takes into account that most abortions today, even though abortion is, praise be to God, prohibited in Louisiana, elective abortion is, we know that they're still happening. And 60% of abortions or more across the country are happening by abortion pills, which again are so easily available online. So this gives women, it extends that cause of action to the harm caused by abortion pills. It extends the amount of time that they have to bring a lawsuit to 5 years, which is an increase from 3 years, which is part of the current law.
It ensures that she, that just basic things, she's the person that brings the lawsuit,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So there's, people are concerned about the woman's medical records in the situation,
Right.
But,
right.
She's making the voluntary decision to bring the suit herself, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
this is, she can bring that lawsuit and she can file a suit against somebody who may be in New York or maybe in California or wherever they are, because
or maybe even in Louisiana, if that's
right.
where the drug dealer.
That's right. Because they're doing business in this state. People say,
correct.
oh, well, we can't control what happens in another state. But they're doing business in this state. I mean, when
Absolutely.
something is being sold online or even in person, obviously, then that's business that's being done in this state.
Yes.
And so that person should be held accountable for the destruction that they cause through their actions.
Absolutely, and we feel like this law is going to be really helpful for women and empower them to seek justice when that is something that they are indeed seeking. And another thing to your point is that the law does give women the option to pursue this by pseudonym.
That's important.
Or
definitely.
by their initials, and so that their court records and all of their information can remain private.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, this, we can imagine the difficulty a woman would have in wanting to bring this forward.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it would be difficult, no doubt. And this, though, we have the precautions in the bill, or the protections that allows her to do that, and it allows her to be hopefully more successful in bringing that lawsuit and
Yes.
holding these people accountable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So this is
Really
an
excited
important
about that.
bill. I mean, a really important bill. We get to put the power back in these women their power's been taken away from them, whether they were coerced or whether they just didn't know all the facts and the
They were
information.
lied to.
They were lied
Yeah,
to.
we know
Or
that.
they weren't even given information on what to do if they have a medical complication.
Or when they were told, do not go to the emergency room, and if you do not tell them that you've taken abortion pills.
Yeah.
It's just such a stunning and disturbing practice,
Right.
the way that this is happening. So.
Anything else on that bill that public should know, or maybe they're hearing misconceptions out there about it that they may not know?
In its original form, the bill did include the cause of action. It provided the cause of action or the right of action to fathers and to the other family members, particularly the grandparents of the unborn child. And we still maintain that those people are very much harmed by the loss of the child and then the effect on the family. I keep thinking about the mom in West Baton Rouge. Certainly she did something awful to her daughter, but in a sense, she's a bit of a victim of the recklessness of this availability herself. She was very likely told that this was safe, that it was an easy solution, that it was her right, that it was all of these things, and she too was lied to, and now their family is forever changed, forever harmed by the actions of these doctors who don't care,
Right.
Are very happy to take the money, and then throw their hands up and say, "Sorry, you can't hold us accountable because we're out of state." So yeah.
And I think one other misconception, and this is what some senators who are for abortion on the Senate floor talked about, how this is going to, if someone just posts on social media or mentions to someone else about abortion, that somehow they can be sued, and that's not the case. It's not violating First Amendment rights or anything like that.
Correct. It very specifically defines what actions give rise to liability, and simply posting or promoting does not give rise to liability.
Yeah.
So now that doesn't mean that they can't be held accountable another way. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't be, but not under this law.
Right. I think all of this with abortion pills, just to throw it out there, we really need the federal government to step up and to take action, because we see what's happened in Texas with that woman. This is an issue where Health and Human Services, RFK, President Trump, all of Congress needs to take decisive action, because we're going to keep chipping away here as best we can.
We're doing everything we can.
Yeah.
We've got everybody on board, all hands on deck,
Right.
but we are limited when until the federal government gets involved.
Right.
There will be only so much that we can do as a state. So.
Okay, on to the next bill, the Stop Coerced Abortion Act, which still is somewhat we were already working on, maybe I can't remember that well, but it connects to that situation that happened in West Baton Rouge.
Absolutely.
Tell me about that bill by Representative Josh Carlson.
Yeah, so currently in Louisiana law, it is a crime to coerce a woman to have an abortion, but the way that the law before this bill by Representative Carlson was passed, the way that the law read was that the person, what it meant to coerce a person to have an abortion was to threaten them with physical violence against their person. So you required physical violence and against the body of the woman. So that did not contemplate a lot of what we know amounts to coercion. And for example, in the West Baton Rouge situation, we don't know all of the facts, but we do know that under the law, unless the young woman was physically threatened with harm to her body, that does not amount to coercion. And so this bill expands what it means to coerce someone, including not just physical battery, but also assault, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and extortion.
An important bill, and passed the legislature really, with flying colors, because the bill was tightened up, and an important bill that's going to move forward. And then it's like you see what happens with the situation in Texas, and you see what happens in West Baton Rouge Parish. And I just think for every media story that gets big, there's so many other stories that no one ever hears about that are happening for real. And we've heard other ones, like we've mentioned earlier, some sad situations of a boyfriend forcing a girlfriend to, and really locking a person in their bathroom until they took the pill, And that's the type of action that wasn't covered under past law, current law, and now will be under this new law that's been passed.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an important one that moved through the process. Now, our third bill, kind of our main bills, unfortunately didn't make it through the process. So I guess if we had to point out kind of a downer of the session, it didn't make it through the process. So this one was House Bill, the number of
478.
478. We called it the Signs of Hope Act. So I want to talk about this. Yeah, it's a great bill, and it's going to come back. and it not passed because of lack of people wanting it to pass, but more because of the funds that would have been required through the state to pass it. So we call this the sign of OPAB because hopefully there was going to be a sign like this that would be have been placed through this law in a health clinics in public schools, public high schools and public colleges that just says pregnant, help is available for you and your baby, and then the state's website with pregnancy help resource that would tell about LA moms, Medicaid options, the resources that are out there, other places that can provide diapers and other supplies, just like, hey, if you're pregnant in high school or college, here are the resources that can help a woman out. This was authored by State Representative Dodie Horton out of the Bossier Parish area, a great champion for life. And so again, the appropriations process just kind of it got lost in the process, and it needed state funding to be allocated, and it just didn't work this year.
We all know that state funds right now are not readily available. So,
that's right. Yeah. So we're optimistic that we're going to bring it back.
Yeah. And I love this so much. I love this bill so much and this concept so much because I often think, like, for example, I just got my Choose Life license plate, and I often think, like, gosh, what if someone is just driving down the road and is just looking for a sign? Just looking for a sign, is in that moment where they don't know what to do, and the only thing they ever see that suggests to them that they can do this is that license plate. And for all of the other reasons, I'm very proud to have it. And I think this sign, or a sign of this sort, could be that life-saving sign, just that one sign that someone's looking for, that you can do this, and there are resources available, and here they are.
Right. So that didn't pass. It's definitely coming back. Well, state funds may not have worked in terms of that bill, but they did for the pregnancy help centers in the state. So the state re-upped the money that it dedicated to pregnancy help centers to $4 million state dollars to go to pregnancy help centers in the state's executive budget. And so that goes through the Department of Children and Family Services and pregnancy centers in the state, something around 30 pregnancy centers. And this allows some of those centers to get state funding to then help them do amazing things to care for mothers before birth and after birth. Some of the centers up to the baby's 4th birthday, providing just amazing services, a great boots on the ground and local community help.
That's exactly how I describe it. I know that as an organization, we do so much. We do a lot of advocacy, and we do a lot of that kind of work too. But they are really, truly the boots on the ground, meeting those women where they are, giving them the resources, giving them the hope that they need, helping them figure it out. And we just hear so often from people who've been helped by pregnancy centers, and it's always just a wonderful thing to hear. So I think that's a great use of state funds.
Absolutely. So, and we are proud to work with pregnancy centers and try to help, and also help be their voice at the state capitol as well. Now, many of them are doing an amazing job advocating for themselves at the Capitol, and we have great partners across the state through the Pregnancy Center Coalition. But we're just happy to work with them and help, magnify the impact of pregnancy centers in the state.
Absolutely.
Okay, a couple other good things that happened this session that we're just going to touch on. First, a bill by State Representative Dustin Miller it allows or requires now that Medicaid fund doula services in the state. Medicaid can reimburse for doula services in the state.
And we're finding, or we hear often about the importance of having a doula, especially for certain communities where there may not be as much access to.
Definitely these maternal deserts or healthcare deserts in the state.
And the doulas are so wonderful because, you have the doctors who are there in their capacity, but the doulas are really walking alongside the mom and speaking for her and speaking with her and advocating for her. So I think that's a wonderful addition to our state law, and I think that it will be really helpful in addressing the maternal and infant mortality situation. So that's a very good positive.
Absolutely. The other one in a similar vein is Representative Mike Baham, is from the Chalmette area, and he passed a bill that requires that private insurance fund what's called home visiting services. These are when nurses or trained professionals are visiting families with newborn babies or young children to check up on the medical progress and the health progress of the child and the mother following birth. So this, again, is going after that those infant and maternal mortality rates that Louisiana has difficulty with, and so this, by requiring it under private insurance, is going to allow that to be more accessible to more people in the state. So we think that's a great success.
And hopefully catching any signs of distress or any signs of issue problems early on so that they can be addressed before it becomes a bigger problem.
Absolutely, So that's great. Louisiana making progress on that as well. So one other smaller thing that happened is a resolution was passed by State Representative Beryl Amity from the Houma Thibodeau area, the Bayou area, and that encourages the Department of Health of Louisiana to look into restorative reproductive health practices.
I think that's so important. We hear all the time about the rampant infertility, and so many of us know friends and family members who have struggled in trying to build their families. And I think that's a great way to start looking at, why is this such a problem? This is a biological process. Why is it such an issue? Why is it such a challenge for some families to have families? So I think that'll be a great starting conversation.
Restorative medical practice are trying to look at the medical reasons, the physiological reasons why, and trying to address that with holistic solutions. And I know I have been fortunate to know people who have been through processes like that, and they have been helped tremendously, and there are children in this world now because of those great processes. So that's an important one. We hope that the Department of Health will study that. We'll look at it, and we hope it leads to more community knowledge about these processes that can be restorative in a holistic manner. Okay, so anything else on our list that from the session?
Well, the elephant in the room is always the exceptions.
Oh, yes.
And so, as promised, the exceptions for certain sex crimes, rape and incest, typically it's how we colloquially would refer to it. Legally, it's referred to something different, but that came back again, brought by Representative Boyd, and that's always a hard one. That's always really hard. But, at the end of the day, a child conceived in any manner is just as valuable and important and deserving of protection as a child conceived in any other manner. So many of us are the result of that type of situation. We know so many people who are here today because a mother in that situation chose life, and we're so very grateful that those people are here with us. And we were grateful, as always, to have Dustin Bertrand come to the Capitol to talk about being the product of a sexual assault, and the bravery of his mom in choosing life. And it's so wonderful to see how, as he has recognized that, he has used that to drive him to speak for those very, very vulnerable children in that situation. So, I hate to say that we're happy, because it's a horrible situation no matter what, but we were able to, and the legislators were able to stand strong and defend life regardless of the means of conception. So.
And I think Dustin states that his mom was violated, right? I mean, what happened to her was absolutely wrong, and what happens to any woman, any young girl who is harmed by it like that.
And nobody is contesting that. We all agree with that. Absolutely.
And, those perpetrators need to, they need to see justice. They need to be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. And we're definitely not arguing with that. And to those people who came and testified and shared their story, I mean, our heart goes out to them.
Undoubtedly.
What happened to them is wrong. We always will continue to stand for the life of the child, no matter how they got there. Now, one legislator who's on the Criminal Justice Committee in the House, who shared her story, it's just amazing that she's on this committee and she is willing to share her story, as State Representative Pat Moore from the Monroe area. And she shares, and correct me if I get the facts wrong, but she shared how, was it her mother or her herself?
Her mother.
Her mother was was conceived through.
No, she was conceived.
Oh.
Her mother was the victim.
That's right. Okay.
Of a rape. I believe at age 14 is when Representative Moore was born, when her mother was 14.
Wow.
Maybe the assault happened while she was even 13. And horrible situation, undoubtedly. But gosh, what a powerful story. And you could just feel the emotion and the passion that she has for protecting people just like her who otherwise would not be here if this were such an available option.
Right. And she wrestles with this, and she said that in the committee. She wrestles with this issue. She knows that what's happening to women and girls is wrong. She just said, I can't overlook the fact that this is how I'm here.
Absolutely.
And while it was wrong what happened to her life still has value, and same with Dustin and others in that situation.
I think we all do. It is a horrible thing to have to confront,
right. Absolutely.
And to have to defend against. But yes, when we go back to the basics, why are we here?
Right.
We are here to protect the dignity and the value of every life from the moment of conception, regardless of how conceived or regardless of what society might say that person's value is. And, if we go back to that, the answer is clear.
Right.
We're trying to solve a very bad problem with the wrong solution,
right.
I think, when we try to make exceptions for that situation available.
And look, we're going to stand for that whether it's popular or not.
Yeah.
Some people said, the public point. Yeah, this is a tough issue, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's really hard. But that life has purpose. I look in Dustin's eyes and I say, you have value, and I'm going to fight for children like you. Now, I want to say that State Representative Tony Bacala also serves on that Criminal Justice Committee. He's from the Ascension Parish, Prairieville area, and he's a strong pro-life legislator, 100%. And he spoke up during that committee. He just applauded Pat Moore and talked about how great she was. He just did a great job making his voice be heard. It's easy in that issue to kind of hide, and just make your vote and leave quick, but he kind of put himself into the fray, spoke clearly, great moral principles into that, so we really appreciate Representative Bacala for speaking up.
And brought logic,
Right.
He brought logic to the issue.
An emotional issue,
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a tough issue, but again, one that we're happy that we're stood for life, even if it's a difficult situation, right? Okay, well, the other thing we want to cover is the heroes of the legislative session.
We have some major heroes to recognize.
Those legislators who partnered with us and just went above and beyond the call of duty.
Yeah.
And, for these legislators, really, this isn't politics. They care deeply about protecting life and helping moms. So right off the start, let's talk House Bill 575.
Yes, Representatives Julie Emerson and Lauren Ventrella, who stood fiercely in the face of some really serious and in some moments some ugly opposition from some of their colleagues even, but they knew it was an important issue, and they stood very strongly for the women and the babies who are harmed by abortion pills. So we're so grateful and so proud of them for not wavering. It would have been a lot easier for them to just say, you know what, I'm not doing this year.
Right.
And they had plenty of other things they could have worked on.
Right. Representative Emerson, as the chair of Ways and Means, has a lot of big, weighty, heavy financial things to do for the whole state. And so she tax things. So she worked a lot behind the scenes to get the bill passed. So she did a great job.
We're really proud of y'all.
Yeah. So, and then when a bill, for those who don't know, a House bill, when it starts on the House side and it goes to the Senate side, there has to be a senator that carries that bill on the Senate floor, because a rep can't argue on the Senate floor, and vice versa, the same thing. So when that bill came over to the Senate side, it was State Senator Rick Edmonds from Baton Rouge who stood up and made the case. And sometimes it's hard to know all the details about a bill that's on the other side of the chamber. Mm-hmm. And he did a great job against a tax and making the case and standing strong.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always so proud of him. And he's so knowledgeable about what we do in general. He's long been a hero. So,
and what did he say on the Senate floor when after some kind of a little bit of attacks, he was closing, and he said, I will always fight for life.
He said when, because, the opposition was saying, when is enough enough? Why are we talking about this every year? When is enough enough? When are we going to stop talking about this? And he said very firmly and emphatically that if we don't stand in the gap, who will? Right. If we don't stand in the gap now, who will? If we don't come back next year and stand in the gap, who will? Yeah. And gosh, that just gives me chills to think about. So right. I appreciate that so much.
And then with House Bill 425, that was Representative Josh Carlson who took that bill on, and he led that bill through the process. And not just that bill, but Josh helped in a lot of ways during the session.
Yes.
And many different issues, small, big issues, and was a great advocate. And you also thinking about what legislators say. What did he say in committee?
That's what he said in committee. He was getting some, what I would consider some illogical objection from one of the committee members. And, I guess the gist of what she was saying is kind of similar to what Senator Edmonds' face was like, when is enough enough? Why are we still talking about this? And he said, also very emphatically and passionately, I will always, and he said it so much better than I'll restate it, but he said something like, I'll always look for an opportunity to protect, or take any opportunity to protect the most vulnerable. And gosh, that was just such a powerful moment. I appreciated it so much then. I think about it all the time. I was really proud of him for saying that.
Awesome. And then when his bill came over to the Senate, it was Senator Brock Myers that took the bill and carried it on the Senate floor. So thanks to him as well. Okay, while Representative Horton's bill didn't pass, she still took it on, fought for it, and advocated for it. So we're grateful to State Representative Dodie Horton for her action. We're thankful to State Representative Jack McFarland, the chair of Appropriations, for helping with the state funding for pregnancy help centers, and that also goes to Senator Womack on the Senate side, on the finance side, and Senate President Cameron Henry. So to both of them. And then, we said earlier, State Representative Pat Moore.
Yes.
And State Representative Tony Bacala, we've shared about them. Their voice being strong in committee was really important. So
and all of the other committee members who raised really important questions, whether it was on a bill that we were supporting or a bill that we were opposing, engaging in that conversation, because like you said earlier, it would be a lot easier for them just to make their vote and not ruffle any feathers. That's right. But so many of them were very strong in carrying forward the conversation. So,
and I think that includes Chairwoman Debbie Villio, who's always been a strong advocate as the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee on the House side. So those are some of our champions for the year. So thank you to all those legislators. And there's so many other ones, and so probably it's kind of dangerous to start naming them like we did. But these ones did such a good job. Representative Amity authored that amendment that we talked about at Restorative Medicine, so her as well. And then, of course, these bills that passed are going to be heading to Governor Landry's desk, and we are confident he will sign those, of course, being a pro-life advocate himself. So we're grateful for that. And then AG Liz Murrell.
I was about to say, we forgot to recognize Attorney General Liz Murrell, who came to testify not once but twice on the importance of HB 575 and how, what she sees in her line of work, and, worked really tirelessly to advocate for it and to give feedback on how to make sure it was in a good position to go forward.
Absolutely. So. And, one other thing that happened during the session is we had Pro-Life Day at the Capitol.
Yes.
And that was a great event. We had a bunch of pregnancy centers set up their booths in the rotunda. People were recognized. Thanks to Secretary Matlock and the Department of Children and Family Services for hosting our pregnancy centers and advocates for lunch. So great Pro-Life Day at the Capitol. And then one other thing is right at the end of session, our Pulse Leadership Institute, while this is kind of not really a Capitol thing, but we bring the high school students and college students who are with our Pulse Leadership Institute to the state capitol, and it was on a day when it just so happened that the legislature wasn't meeting, so it was like kind of a ghost town, but we were fortunate that State Senate Pro Temp Regina Ashford Barrow was at the Capitol, and she met with our students, and she's a great pro-life Democrat in the legislature, and she showed our students around.
And they were so excited to meet her, too.
That's right. Absolutely.
I heard great things. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think that's a wrap. That's the session. Again, just what we said at the start, how grateful we are for our supporters,
Yes.
Those volunteers, everyone who contacted their legislator to ask them to vote for a pro-life bill. And just to remember to everybody, these legislators aren't going to stay pro-life themselves. Pro-life citizens in this state need to be reaching out to their legislators on a regular basis.
100%.
Yeah.
They say that often, you know. That's how they know what their people want. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good.
So,
well, anything else we didn't cover that I'm missing?
Like Senator Edmonds said, if we don't speak up now, if we don't stand in the gap, who will?
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much. Thanks, Erica, for your hard work during the session, and thanks everybody. And Louisiana Rights Life will always be at the Capitol, and please get in contact us if you want to be a part of our pro-life movement year-round. Thank you.